Hey guys, I'm Davin. Do you remember when I used to start all my videos like that? Oh, those were good times. Today I've got a replay from Coops versus Cool Umbrella, two regular submitters of replays on this particular channel, facing off in a nice land battle. We've got Ogre Kingdoms versus Tomb Kings. Let's go ahead and take a look at the builds. We've got a Tyrant leading the way for Coops here. Got a whole bunch of Ogre infantry with Noblar backup, of course. Looks like probably 5 Noblars, I would imagine. Maybe 4 only? Yeah, 5 Noblars, that's right. We've got plenty of bulls as well, including dual hand weapons here. 1 unit of Iron Guts and 1 unit of Man-Eater's Iron Fists you saw there in the opening. Fire Belly as well. Lore of Fire forever has been good against Tomb Kings, probably will continue to be so. Got Saber Tusk packs out on the wings here, and the Regiment of Renowned Crushers, the Sky Striders. As for the Tomb Kings, Cool Umbrella coming in hot with Citra, the Imperishable, on horseback. Very good choice. I've been seeing quite a bit of this lately. He is anti-large AP on horseback, has a solid amount of HP, not that much, but 80 armor, very good combat stats, is actually a pretty good duelist. Used to do this back when Tomb Kings first came out, but haven't really done it much since then, to be honest. But I have been seeing a little bit more of it lately in some Tomb Kings replays sent to me, so let's see how it gets on here. That anti-large bonus, obviously going to be very good. Speaking of anti-large, Bone Giant has a massive one on his shooting attack here, which should be quite impactful. We've also got some Shabti Great Bows, Regiment of Renowned Sepulchral Stalkers for more anti-large and melee and decent shooting as well. Skeleton Spearmen and Tomb Guards with Halberds, 2 Tomb Guards Halberds, 4 Skeleton Spears, and some regular Skeleton Warriors as well. So let's get things rolling. Nice Burning Head going to be unleashed in the front line here, wrecking some skeletons. Of course, Burning Head has long been the bane of Tomb King's infantry, especially Tomb Guard, due to their lower armor than many other units in their class. They do take quite a bit of damage. That just went on some Skeleton Warriors and did a decent amount of damage to both of them. Also temporarily lowers their leadership, of course, with that burnt effect, but not really going to end up mattering too much with the leadership side, because the follow-up was not quite there in time, but still, I mean, certainly Ogre's dual hand weapon should be enough to get in here and blend these skeletons, and no problem. Iron Guts, of course, as well. Their armor will certainly help them tank out quite a bit more damage. Not too much shooting here from the Tomb Kings. There's no skeleton archers, which are a danger, hence the Iron Fists, which do, of course, have a missile block chance. They also have increased melee defense from their little fist thing there versus regular Man-Eaters, which is a big benefit. You know, Man-Eaters, one of their biggest downsides is their relative squishiness. They don't have a lot of armor, don't have the best melee defense in the world. They kind of have a little bit of the Minotaur problem. They're relatively expensive, and their defensive stats are not amazing, but a missile block chance obviously helps against small arms fire and higher melee defense. I think they have higher armor as well versus the regular Man-Eaters. Have to double check on that, but the Ogres are definitely pushing through, taking some significant losses as the Bone Giant shoots in at some high-value targets in the center. Got some decent damage on the Fire Belly there, but of course, Ogre Kingdoms, as long as they're not losing out units, have plenty of capacity to recover, so the Fire Belly stands out in the distance there. The Bone Giant really should be focusing on the Sky Striders as soon as they come into range, which they are now. Very expensive unit here, and can not even kill a single unit model on that shot there, which is pretty impressive stuff, honestly. But oh man, these Sepulchral Stalkers are in big trouble. The Crushers getting a nice rear charge in here. Sepulchral Stalkers, of course, don't get their charge defense if they're in a rear charge situation like that. They do have Joff's Incantation of Cursed Blades, though, for extra weapon strength. And did the Overcast? I didn't quite catch. Maybe it overcasted for anti-large, which is definitely a good idea against Ogres. But sort of what I wanted to talk about in a meta sense here, as this battle is already developing pretty significantly, is the build here for Tomb Kings makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's not full-on degenerate like 10 halberd / spear infantry spam, but it is a lot of anti-large. And I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that. You know, Ogres surprisingly have a lot of flexibility in what they can take and the way that they approach situations. The Noblars are definitely unsung heroes here. You can see they've got this Tomb Guard Halberd completely surrounded, and they're likely to lose this engagement in the long run, but just keeping this unit basically tied to the ground, basically locked in place here, unable to escape really, That is great value, and, you know, both of those units together are still less than half the cost of that Tomb Guard, which is just so cost-effective, right? When you think about it, the way they're able to tie up that value. But Cetra gets caught out here. The Sky Striders are actually somewhat vulnerable to him because not that many can be in contact with him at the same time. They do take some damage from him. Incantation of Desiccation as well. Significantly nerf their stats. I don't know. That AoE might not have been a super efficient cast. It only hit them, though. It is a quite expensive spell. Basically like an area of effect Feebling Foe, right? But, yeah, 15 Winds of Magic, so if it only hits that one high-value unit, maybe it ends up being worth it at the end of the day. It's hard to say, but the balance of power swung pretty heavily against Koops there, as a lot of his troops are having a lot of leadership issues. The Bone Giant also still super healthy, with a lot of ammunition left. Has already got some really good value. Yeah, almost 2,000 value on the Bone Giant, already shooting various targets. The poor Tyrant here gets beat up real bad by Cetra. Another Butcher is going to be used, though, on the Sky Striders. That's the thing with Ogres. Even if you don't take Lore of the Great Maw, you can still get healing from your army ability. Makes taking, you know, non-healing Lores of Magics, like this Lore of Fire, that much more potent. But, yeah, I really like the Fire Belly in this particular matchup. Should be noted also, Cetra with his item will do fire damage. I don't know if he brought it. It is pretty expensive, but looks like he did not. But anyway, more Burning Head here, debuffing the Tomb King's leadership, getting some good damage on those skeletons. Saber Tusks, of course, are going to be super critical here as they're able to clean up a lot of units out the periphery. You can see Ogres have a lot of very weakened units. Tomb Kings are actually starting to lose out on a lot of their support structure, and, you know, still have a few Tomb Guard Halberds left, still have the Bone Giant obviously fighting, but starting to take some damage. And the Man-Eaters are immune to Psychology straight up. They're not going to get Terror routed. They have pretty good leadership as well, plus those decent combat stats. I mean, certainly 51 melee defense is very high for a monstrous infantry type unit. Even their melee attack, too, is more than enough to deal with this Bone Giant. I mean, Bone Giant's fantastic shooting monsters, but really very poor in combat generally. And 32 attack, 27 melee defense is not enough to stand, certainly, against the Man-Eaters here. But let's get in close for some more cinematics as the Bone Giant fights it out. We got Cetra in the background there, also getting circle beaten by Ogres, finishing as many as he can, but yeah, the 80 armor on him will mean that he'll take damage from the bulls as well. But yeah, Tyrant here with his snacks needs to go fight in melee against some low tier stuff so he could potentially regenerate, but at this point, Koops' kind of overwhelming numbers has started to wear through, and, you know, skeletons, although skeleton spears you would think are on paper very decent in this matchup, they end up, you know, not necessarily always paying out. And this is true of a lot of low tier spears against the Ogres. You might think just spam spears, but like Clan Rat spears, skeleton spears, stuff on that sort of lower tier level, you know, Bretonnian men-at-arms spears, right? Stuff like that is just not strong enough to stand against an Ogre's charge. And here, especially Noblars on Ogres stacked, those low tier spears are just going to get run over. And especially if their leadership is low or they're susceptible terror routes, here obviously they are not, as they are undead, and they're going to suffer crumbling, which is not super impactful, but I mean, you can generally do enough shock damage to actually make it matter, where maybe even hit disintegration, which will actually kill an undead unit, believe it or not. Skeletons have low enough leadership baseline that it's not too hard to do. There's no skeletons on the field I can show you right now, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in the end screen. But for now, let's just soak up some cinematics. Cetra manages to reunify with the Bone Giant and make their final stand together, which is definitely the right thing to do. Got a handful of Tomb Guards still defending here as well. The Crusher's getting a nice charge into the Bone Giant. Man, they're like 3/4 the height of him almost. I guess maybe more half if you measure from the head, but still very impressive height there on the Crushers versus the Bone Giant. And yeah, it's a cool umbrella. Not quite enough there in the tank, ends up getting overwhelmed. So interesting, you know, like I said, the low tier spears, I mean, they are cost effective, certainly. It's not like you don't want to bring them, but you don't want to necessarily be over reliant on them either. Certainly the Bone Giant got a lot of value. Tactically, was it the best pick here? It's hard to say. The Sepulchral Stalkers, I like the pick on paper, but they definitely got outclassed very heavily by the Ogre Kingdoms here. So Crushers are definitely a problem. You know, they're certainly a problem. Not you know, on at least on paper, you don't really have that many great answers for them, except maybe just more Tomb Guard halberds. And that's the one thing for Cool Umbrella I would maybe say about this build is, as much as I do like the Eyes of the Desert Sepulchral Stalkers, I might swap them out and just take more Tomb Guard halberds here. Bow Shop, they also had a little bit of a hard time operating. Ogres are fast faction. You definitely have to account for their speed. You know, generally their infantry line, they're going to want to engage their ogres on top of the Noblars, so that does limit them to a degree to the speed of the Noblars. But in general, you know, they've got great fast attack units. You know, Saber Tusk pack, in my opinion, one of the best fast attack units in the game right now for the cost. And of course, their cavalry is very strong. And even the ogres themselves, once the battle lines crash and things get a little bit chaotic, the ogres can chase stuff around and run things down. And when they rout, you're not really going to be able to catch them with spear infantry. So probably need some cavalry in this build also. The anti-infantry Ushabti, although it did end up almost paying for itself, hard to criticize. Maybe I actually cut the Bow Shopti thinking about it and take a couple of Nekara horsemen or even regular skeleton horsemen. They cause fear, and being able to chase off some routed Noblars or bulls is super impactful. Not that I think bulls actually cause fear. Let's check that. But anyway. Let's see here for the Ogre Kingdoms. Do bulls cause fear? Yes, they do. So they wouldn't be susceptible to it necessarily, but still, just relatively low leadership. And speaking of which, I also wanted to finish one thing with the Tomb Kings. On low-tier spears, I mean, only 35 leadership. So what this means is if you get skeleton spears to -70 leadership, if they haven't changed any of the values since last time I checked, you'll trigger disintegration, which means the unit will die almost instantly, and it will not be able to be recovered by any healing effects. And it's definitely a good way to just munch, you know, undead low-tier units very quickly. It can be tricky to do. Obviously, in a real battle scenario, they're going to have other leadership effects going on from potentially nearby characters, flanks secured. There's a million leadership effects in the game, it feels like sometimes. So it's definitely highly variable, but shock damage is one of the best modifiers. The way it works is if a unit has taken a certain amount of damage within the last like, there's different thresholds, but let's say 3 seconds, for example, right? They've taken, just as an example, if they've taken 25% of their HP in damage in the last 5 seconds, which is a pretty considerable amount of shock damage, that is a huge leadership debuff. It's one of the strongest leadership debuffs in the game. And if you can get that stacked with maybe some other leadership debuffs, you know, maybe some shot by small arms fire or shot by artillery, maybe, you know, attack from the flank, potentially some other kind of leadership modifiers, you could get these guys to pop relatively quickly. And it is an issue for low-tier, you know, undead units specifically. But then, of course, you think about other low-tier spears that just don't have the best leadership in the world against ogres. Ungor spears, again, you know, men-at-arms, clan rats, stuff like that. They're just going to get run over at the end of the day, and they're likely to just rout anyway. So it's kind of interesting, you know, low-tier spears versus ogres. Let me know what you guys think about that topic in the comments below. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.